So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and I can't quite escape the feeling of, oh shit, here we go again. But this map, hopefully, will not crash consistently every 5 minutes, because this one doesn't have fences plastered over every 5 square foot of it. So, maybe this time we can get through a map and I can actually enjoy myself while I'm watching it, without worrying about the thing falling apart every other minute. But this does have the potential to be a pretty good one, to be honest with you. And this is a map, to be fair, that I've done on 0.97, and it was absolutely fine. So I think we're going to be good here. This is I think one of the Belfast maps that was added. It was actually one of the first maps on 0.97 that I ended up showing, and it's one of those that is really very interesting. It was one of the maps that was developed for 0.97, which I really do enjoy quite a lot, because there's a lot going on. And it does look as though it's going to be a 4v3, and this time, whereas before we showed a battle that was more or less just a field battle here in the middle, this one is going to take on much more of a siege-like look to it, I think, because the 3 are obviously going to have to try and defend the mountains over on this side as the 4 close in. But we also have one army who's kind of cut off from the rest, and they're going to have to move quite quickly across the field if they want to make it. Unless there's a gentleman's agreement to allow Dale here to actually get into a defensive position, they're going to be in real trouble, because they're going to be cut off very quickly, I think, and there's no way around, I think, this way to get into it. Yeah, you can't pass these hills, so Dale would have to just back up into the to the edge of the map here, and maybe try and use some of the farmsteads to mitigate some of the damage that would be done to them, but we shall see. We'll go through the attackers first of all, as we normally do in these siege type battles, and it is kind of good versus evil. It's certainly all evil factions on the attack. One evil faction, however, seems to have had a change of heart, as they're going to be joining the forces of good today. We'll start off with Lord Blackhole, who's going to be playing as HRUN. We've got the Serpent's Fangs over here, which of course are the new archer that HRUN have had added to them in the most recent patch, purely because HRUN, their skirmish force has never been the best. They certainly have had the ability to do damage, obviously, especially with their javelins, but archer-wise they were always lagging behind quite a lot of other factions in the game. But the Serpent's Fangs do give them something a little bit different. Mainly their ability comes from the fact that they're very good in melee, as well as having that bow at range as well. So it gives them a lot of utility, but also they do have poison arrows. They're not the most damaging archer, though. For the cost you pay, they don't do a lot of damage, and the poison arrows are certainly not up to the same sort of level as like body piercing or armor piercing. So do bear that in mind. The Serpent's Fangs are much more designed for sort of a multifaceted role than just doing damage at range with their arrows. Poison arrows can be useful, though, as we've seen. Southron archers, so the basic Haradrim archer on the front line, a little bit more up to the challenge of being in a skirmish fight than the Haradrim archers, certainly. But the wooden armour still leaves much to be desired against some of the more heavily armoured kingdoms of men from the west. Southron warband over here as well. Once again, in comparison to the western kingdoms, their armour and shields are very lacking, certainly. But numbers-wise, they are on a par at least, but also, the armour piercing is the main reason why you want to bring the Southron warband. The fact that armour piercing makes them just that little bit more useful in melee alongside other units, perhaps of higher quality, does give HRUN that sort of savagely attack-focused front line that they're more known for. HRUN obviously have never been a faction that have been all that based around survivability after all. Several units of Mahud warriors, which we haven't actually seen an awful lot of in 0.97, because the Serpent Guard are now the force that they perhaps always should have been. But it does mean that the Mahud don't often get selected, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest with you, because for the cost that you pay for them, and the numbers that you get and the abilities in melee that you get, they're actually pretty decent. Their shields are also a little bit better, so they can actually withstand a bit of arrow fire from the front. But of course their armour is very poor overall, next to nothing, to be honest with you, only shoulder guards. So if their shields are not coming into effect from the front or the side, if they're getting shot in the back, they're going to be just as vulnerable as most other HRUN units are to arrows. There are some Haradrim spearmen a little bit further forward here, so obviously just the fodder of the HRUN army, nothing too special to be spoken about there. Just in behind these stakes we have several units of the dismounted Serpent Guard, armour upgraded, so like I said, as far as line infantry goes, they are now very good for HRUN. Maybe not as durable as other units of this type, but good in melee, and with the armour upgrade as well, it makes them a tough cookie to take down in melee, honestly. Arrows, however, those shields are not the best, so they can certainly be got out that way. Southron pikemen, very low stats, but the AP on pikes is something that can potentially be really good if you can babysit them enough. And Harad often are they charge forward so quickly, Harad, that often the South-Run pikemen can be sort of caught out a bit. We'll see if that's the case here. Mahud Beast Hunters, Javelins, Harad always known for them, of course. A couple of units of the Mahud Berserkers, very nice AP troops that are cheap. Maybe not the best in terms of their ability to keep themselves alive, but they can certainly do a lot of damage while they are there. And then, of course, the mighty Demons of the Desert as well. Absolutely devastating if you can get them into the right position. But that is easier said than done. The second attacking army is of the player who sent me the battle replay, which is going to be Tommy Weiser, and he is going to be playing as Mordor, so he's got some fodder on the front, obviously cheap, completely free, so you may as well bring them. Some Moran archers, which much like Harad, most of Mordor's skirmish line is just designed to sit there and skirmish and die and absorb the ammunition of their foe. There are obviously exceptions to that rule, just like Harad, but the Moran archers sort of fill that role. Minas Morgul Chosen, very solid unit of spears, very heavily armoured, very tough to break down, not necessarily the best at killing things, but they do sit in the middle of most of Mordor's lower tier units and offer a little bit of a spine, which is nice. Moran infantry, very basic orc infantry, so you know what to expect. Lots of numbers, but not necessarily the most quality. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, very good for pushing through the lines if used at the right time. Time and time again, actually, in 0.97, we've seen pushing units like this, the Great Shield Infantry, misused actually, and they sort of try to push in, but they do so at the wrong moment and they get stopped dead in their tracks and slaughtered. So we'll see if that's going to be the case for Mordor here. The mighty Nazgul, which if you can implant them into the middle of your Mordor line, there's a lot of potential for the Nazgul to do a lot of damage. The Orc Javelins, so cheap but yet so efficient if used correctly. Obviously, you know, you pay so little for a unit of Javelins like this, and yet they can do so much damage to individual targets if you can get them into the right area. Sauron's Will on both sides, the Temple Guard back here with their AP arrows, which is actually going to be the General's Bodyguard, leaving the Nazgul to be used a little bit more freely. And then some Olag Kai and some Mountain Trolls on both sides as well. So pretty much a classic Mordor army, sort of basic Moran units all over the place, cheaper Orc units, and then units of higher quality interspersed throughout it as well. Then we have another Orc faction. We have Killeen, who's going to be playing as Isengard. We have some Dunlending clansmen over here. Lots of Dunlending clansmen, actually, which will be useful for zoning out cavalry, obviously, with their heightened anti-cavalry bonus for a militia unit. They can still take tons of damage off the charge, of course, but, you know, Isengard are a faction which have got a lot of options for zoning out cavalry, which perhaps should be unsurprising, considering their natural enemies are RHUN. Uruk-hai crossmen, I've said before, crossbows, if you can get them into the right position in a battle, you know, they can be devastating. The stopping power they offer makes it very, very difficult to withstand them for long, so your best bet is to try and kill them before that happens. But again, easier said than done with Isengard because of their ability to zone out aggressive cavalry. Uruk-hai infantry, very, very solid unit of line infantry that Isengard have available to them. And then the third and final pillar of Isengard's centre are, of course, the pikemen. Very, very nice to have them in an Isengard front line. Again, though, if they're on the attack, Isengard, you do need to be a little bit more careful with the pikemen. While they do have good armour, they are still going to be one of the first things that get focused down by well-positioned defensive archers. Uruk-hai infantry, some berserkers up here, another unit which will be focused down if you're not careful because they have next to no armour. No armour at all, actually, I believe. But multiple HP, and of course they're devastating in melee against armoured units. Speaking of which, we have the superior version to them, the Naz-kai, which are effectively Uruk-hai berserkers without the same weaknesses. They're not quite as fragile when their hit points are gone, and also their defences are a little bit better, but overall they're still focused on very much the same thing, savagely charging in and ripping their enemies limb from limb. Lurtz hunting pack in the background for some body piercing, and then the Isengard Ballista, which the Ballista here could be very, very useful at breaking through lines of defences. And then finally, we have Ruvik096, a name that I've not seen before, so welcome. We have Umbar, and we've got some Adunheim Shield Guard on the front line. We have some Corsair Blackguards, several units of Corsair infantry, and then up over here the rest of the army is going to be moving around this way, which is definitely the right thing to do because there is a path through the hills which allows them to circumvent the nasty frontal defensive position. Belagair archers, Naruna Arurul Guard for another very good wing of the Umbar skirmish line, and then a combination of Alcarondas Legion, Balakith Axe Guard with the armour upgrade, Balakith Shield Bearers with the armour upgrade, and the Harbingers of Castamere with Castamere himself rolling with them. So that's pretty much what you would expect from the Umbar infantry line. Very, very good quality, but they need to be careful because obviously if they get bottled up when they're on the attack, there will be problems for them. Now we'll go through the defenders. First of all, we have Y2K86 who's playing as Dale, who is in the most disadvantageous position if the attackers do not allow him to get back to the safety of his allies. He's got some Dalian Paladins over here, obviously really, really strong bodyguard tier shock infantry along the same sort of lines as something like the Witch Realm Hammer Guard or the Elvelen Hammer Guard as well. Very, very nasty great maces. Brilliant against armoured units. Maybe not so much against units that are not so heavily armed and have a lot of defensive skill, but that's true of any unit of that type, to be honest with you. Dismounted Elves of Dale, as line infantry goes, like Dale, if they go for high quality in their front line is very tough to break down and very good, and the Dismounted Elves of Dale are a big part of that. Great armour, really good in melee as well as line infantry goes, similar in many ways to the Alcarondas Legion of Umbar, only Umbar tend to go heavily into their infantry more often than Dale, because Dale are a little bit more focused on their archers, so maybe the Elves of Dale don't quite get the credit they're due in that regard. But in this case, maybe we will see that. They do have slightly lower shield values than other units of line infantry though, but they do have better armour to kind of compensate for that. Then we have the Barding Herd, the other facet to the higher quality Dalian front line, that heavy lamella armour, the nice shields on their back as well. Very, very strong halberdiers because they're very tough to break down, and the armour piercing should be very useful against quite a lot of the attackers today, except for Harad, of course, which is unfortunate seeing as Harad are probably the closest army to them at the moment. Dalian spearmen are here. Then we also have some Lake Town infantry, which of course have got a few volleys of ammunition in them, much like the Corsair infantry, before they then become light line infantry. They're not really up to much in melee, to be honest with you, nor are they brilliant at range, but just the fact that they have that versatility, it also means that Dale can add even more to their skirmish line without compensating too much in terms of melee, so that's very nice for them, of course, and fits their faction perfectly. Some standard Bardian marksmen without the armour upgrade, so just the lamella jacket and those helmets as well. Very good in a skirmish fight as well. Dale and Umbar sort of share quite a lot in common in that regard, but Dale are a little bit more focused on their archers, whereas Umbar more so on their infantry. We have some Dalian bowmen over here as well, some Morroquendi bows, as well as some Dalian Royal Guard and some Blackshot Dragons. So the full repertoire of Dale's skirmish forces on display here. They need to be real careful though, because they could be focused down very quickly here. Some Keldwyn River Patrol, some Swordmasts of Escaroth, and also some Earls of Dale. One unit of Earls of Dale is not going to be enough to cover the entire army though, but perhaps fortunately neither Harad nor Mordor have really gone for any cavalry, so they can't charge them down as quickly as maybe they would like. But Isengard, if they move forward quickly, could cut off their only route through. We shall see. Then we have RHUN, who is played by my doppelganger, and this is the army which has had the change of heart, so the Easterlings have decided to join the good side of Middle-earth. We shall see if they are punished for their betrayal today. No Dragon's Breath. No, I lied. The Dragon's Breath is over here. The Dragon's Breath seemed to be one of the main causes of the crashing in the last battle, though I'm sure that was because it was in conjunction with Pelagria, which is made with tons of fences. We shall see if the Dragon's Breath proves to be a problem for me once again, although I'm 99% sure that wasn't the issue, because I've seen that time and time again and it didn't cause crashes, but we'll see. Loke-Gant Brim, Flagrim, crossbows. We know what to expect from RHUN. A very well-balanced army with a big focus on AP. Halberdiers, macemen, crossbows, javelins, and the Baltroth Tribesmen are in there as well. You can see the Dragon Knights just in the background, which could be used to really devastating effect, actually. We shall see if they are going to take the more bold approach. Isengard, probably not the best target to go after. But Harad, Mordor, maybe even Umbar, if Umbar decide to go across the open ground, could be a good target there. Scion Rim, big fan of the Scion Rim, as I've said before, because of how tough they are. There's also Clansmen and all sorts of lower tier units in there as well. Then we move on to the final defending army, which is going to be Mirkwood. So Mirkwood, of course, the elves, lots of Beshi as well, playing as Mirkwood. Lots of archers on display for Mirkwood, I'm sure, which will be very useful if they decide to dig in. Quite necessary as well if the defenders are to win this one. Got some Ents over here. I see some fences in the background, which makes me nervous almost immediately. But the Ents, nice juggernauts here. They need to be careful because there's a lot of trolls on display for Mordor, and certainly the attackers have got all the tools they need to deal with them, but if used at the right time, the Ents could be devastating. Got some spears of Emondwyr, some bows of Emondwyr, so some horse archers which could be used. I don't think actually Isengard have got any art. Well, they've got the Lurtz Hunting Pack, but the Lurtz Hunting Pack, to use its ammunition so early on a unit of horse archers, might not be ideal for them. We'll see how Beshi decides to use his horse skirmishers, because against Umbar they'll easily be able to zone them out with their archers. Upgraded Hiri Lang, we have some blades of Emondwyr, we have some upgraded Hiri Alth, as well as some more spears of Emondwyr, so going for a pretty balanced approach, but also the upgraded Elven King's Palace Guard, a terrifying unit of infantry to behold on the front line. Elder Council, Spear, Javelin hybrids. There's a gap here which I can only assume means the Greenwood Rangers are here, which is obviously going to be a good pick. Or maybe even a unit of Woodland Realm Patrol and Greenwood Rangers. I would imagine we're going to see both, maybe even Warden's Vam on Lank. A couple of units of upgraded Hiri Peng, and then the General's Bodyguard is going to be the standard unit of Elders of the Elven King with their Silverthorn arrows. So, I think that's just about it for the army composition, so without further ado, let's begin. And let's hope and pray that the game, for once, runs properly and doesn't crash. So, the real question I think here is whether or not the attackers are going to allow Y2K86 to get back into position, because honestly, with the amount of archers Dale have, they could prove to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks for the attackers to try and get through, because it is an extremely strong skirmish line that Dale have on display here. A good mix of lower end units which can skirmish with the enemy quite comfortably, mid-tier units which are very tough in the Dalian Bowmen and Bardian Marksmen, and then of course the show-stopping units that they have here at the high end, the Morroquendi Bows, heavy Elven Archers with poison arrows, the Blackshot Dragon Slayers with their AP as well, capable of focusing down individual targets. Also some Javelins as well, but it does look as though the attackers are going to do the honourable thing here and allow Dale passage. Mordor with no such movement, Harad no movement either, and critically I think Isengard also with no movement whatsoever, which is good to see, to be honest with you, because I think it does show a good deal of sportsmanship. But I do feel as though in this sort of situation what I would be tempted to do is, once Dale have sort of passed Isengard's sort of immediate threat, that's when the battle should start in earnest, because then Dale have got only a set amount of time to get into a good defensive position before the attackers are upon them. And I feel as though that would be that's all fair, I think. Okay, so after a short interlude there, not because of a crash this time, but because my recording software decided to go a little bit weird. I swear, if it's not one thing, it's another. I can't really catch a break at the moment, but regardless, we should be good now, because I've forced NVIDIA to cooperate. I've got the window open in the background and made sure that the in-game overlay stays on, and you know, maybe NVIDIA are slightly to blame for my problems lately. I mean, it would not surprise me. They've proven themselves to be grossly incompetent when it comes to the GeForce experience a few times in the past, and it would not surprise me to note that maybe that is the issue that's been going on. I'm sure that part of it has been some of the maps that I've been using, because we can ruminate on this another time, I think. For the time being, let's get back into the map at hand. So you can see that RHUN are shifting across into position, and they of course have got some Carmel's Shadow Bows, some nasty rangers, and of course the crossbows. RHUN's skirmish force honestly could be one of the main problems the attackers have to deal with in this situation as well, because of course they have got a big contingent of crossbows. Their archers are pretty good, they've got some good cheap javelins. While it may not be the best skirmish force in the game, certainly not up to the level of someone like Mirkwood, especially with their archers, it is certainly a pretty nasty one, especially when they've got a good defensive position like this, because some of their more fragile units, like their Eastron crossbowmen, will not come under so much scrutiny. You can see also Mordor are going to be moving across over to here, and I will be actually quite interested to see how the attackers decide to approach this, because I think what this is going to come down to is two distinct theatres of war, essentially. This one, which is going to be the one that I'm sure the defenders hope the attackers spend most of their time trying to get through, because it will be the most easily defended, but also that didn't go as far as I would hope, but also this one over here. Now this is a very narrow pass, but it's much more difficult actually for the defenders to get some skirmishes into a pretty decent position over here. There's only very small hills that they can use. It's still bad for the attackers coming down here, because obviously a very narrow pass. Something like Rangers will be able to really shoot them like fish in a barrel if they do decide to come down here. But I feel as though personally that you need to sort of more evenly spread your troops, or at least go 2/3 going up the really nasty approach over here, and 1/3 of the attackers need to go down over here, because it's a very nice defensive position that has been set up. I feel as though always when you're the attackers you need to try and stretch the defenders as much as you possibly can. If you do that, then you're well on the way to winning the battle. Here though, we can actually get a good look now at RHUN's force in earnest a little bit more, now that it's separated off a bit more. The Eastron clansmen do have both levels of armour upgrades, so that will make them a better force in melee, of course. As far as militia units go, the Eastron clansmen are some of the best in melee that there are, because you can upgrade them twice. They wield those swords as well, so they should actually be pretty good at dealing with some of the lower tier units that they're going to be facing today. So a good pick, I think, from my doppelganger there. Elves of the Elven King. Yeah, I mean, Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen are here as well, obviously. That's where the general's at as well. I kind of like the runic general model. I like the fact that he's got this sort of the heavy golden plate. I like the helm. He's only got one scimitar, but with armour that heavy, I guess you don't really need a shield as such. Yeah, the Dragon's Wrath Crossman. It'd be interesting to see if this unit can actually get into a position where it can actually utilise its ammunition. Because time and time again, obstructions have been an issue for them. Meanwhile, Dale are just now getting into position. And this, I think, now that their units are starting to cross through the farmsteads over here, this, I think, would be when everything is fair game for the attackers to move in. You can see Harad just sort of making their way across as well. I'm loath to make a cut here because I don't know when the battle is truly going to begin, because obviously the skirmish fight could begin at any moment. The defenders could also commit forward their cavalry, their bows of Emondwyr, their dragon knights. The Earls of Dale could suddenly turn about face and charge forward. I kind of doubt it though, because Isengard will be ready for them with pikes, crossbows, spears, all the sorts of things which are good for zoning out cavalry. Isengard have at their disposal in abundance. But over here we do have a little bit more movement now. Marching slowly down this way, we have Ruvik's Umbar detachment, which is actually a pretty elite detachment as well. But you can see that Mirkwood are in position over here. Umbar are going to need to send forward some archers to skirmish with Mirkwood. And Mirkwood are certainly the more damaging of the two factions when it comes to archery. But it is kind of an interesting matchup between the two forces here, because it's kind of like, what is superior when it comes to archers, attack or defence? Because Umbar can skirmish with the very best of them. But Mirkwood, of course, are the very best of them when it comes to damage. But can they skirmish with a faction that places as much emphasis on armour, shield, sort of that staying power in a skirmish fight in the way that Umbar do? We shall see. I mean, Mirkwood also do have their armour upgrades, so that's something they have going for them. And also, RHUN are going to send over some infantry units as well to help try and hold the line. And the AP of the Flagman will be very useful. I mean, as line infantry, the Alcarondas Legion are certainly the superior of the two units overall. But the AP, especially when you're backed up by Elven units, could be enough to swing that battle quite heavily into the defenders' favour. We shall see. Crossbows as well, of course. And then there's the mighty runic Dragonfire. Interesting defensive position. I kind of like the fact here that the defenders have decided to move forward and contest the lower ground here. Because I think the temptation would be to just sort of send your units and just indefinitely hold this choke point over here. But there is also a school of thought which suggests if you do that, you don't really have the best shot with your archers and crossbows, whereas if you have up here Eastron crossbows in position, it does also make it a little bit more difficult perhaps for the attacking archers to get in position to immediately skirmish with the defending archers. So there are certainly pros and cons to this. Earls of Dale waiting. I mean, the Earls of Dale, interestingly enough, are certainly a more defensive cavalry unit by nature. So it'll be interesting to see how they are used in this battle, because it's not as if the attackers have got a great deal of cavalry themselves. None, in fact, that I could see. So the melee cavalry aspect to them is not really going to be all that important. They're just going to have to be used for their heavy armour and their ability to screen, I think, for the Cummel's Dragon Knights and for the bows of Emondwyr that they're going to be riding alongside. But Dale now most certainly are in position. Some dismounted Earls of Dale still just sort of waiting over here in the farms. Keldon River Troll's still moving. Are they being left behind purposefully, perhaps? To maybe give the attackers something a little bit more to think about? I mean, I don't think it's a particularly good idea, because they can just be swamped, but I mean, it is kind of an awkward position to attack, I suppose. Mordor still just shifting across, still very much the calm before the storm here, as now both armies are going to be giving one another the evil eye across the field. But this certainly will give the battle much more of a siege-like mentality, as the attackers have to move in. Dale, though, should be very much at home skirmishing here, even though they don't maybe have the numbers of Mordor or Harad's long-range archers. The quality, which is much more of a factor in .97, very much in Dale's favour. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers and the Barding Herd slowly marching into position. That is one thing I would say that counts against the defenders somewhat, and that is they don't really have pikemen. Like, Dale are the only faction that could have even brought pikes in this sort of situation. It would have only been one unit of Morroquendi pikes, and they omitted them as well. So they do not have the ability to engage in a really long line battle, especially with Isengard. Those Uruk-hai pikemen could be incredibly useful in the later stages of the battle if the Isengard player looks after them enough. And in this situation, as Isengard, I absolutely would be saving my Uruk-hai pikemen towards the end. We've seen recently, actually, the fact that the Uruk-hai pikemen winning a fight like that across a river on Anduin. There's also the Isengard Ballista, which could be a real factor in the early stages of this battle. Just marching into position. Umbar waiting. It could be quite a quick battle, actually, now that I come to think of it. It could be that the attackers decide to go all in right from the off, which will decide matters quite quickly, because of course that does put them at the mercy of the defending skirmishers. Umbar moving across pretty much their entire army over here, which I think is right. I think they are going to need their entire army to move through here, because I think, again, like, this is a good opportunity, I think, for the attackers to move forward. But now I think we might start to see some orc fodder moving forward as the attacking armies start to get into position. I don't really think the attackers need to wait for HRUN personally. I mean, it's not as if you're going to need all three armies right from the off here. There's only so much space to occupy after all. Interesting defensive line interspersed with halberdiers. The Blades of Emondwyr are in here, so a bit of elven quality mixed in with the armour and sort of really defensive nature of Dale's infantry, as well as the armour piercing and perhaps more balanced approach of the runic line. You've got to love the runic unit models. Ever since Vanilla 3rd Age they've been implemented, and they've always looked terrific. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. See strong crossmen up on the hills. I think that's actually an Aztec tower from Medieval 2 they've got there. Is it? Yeah, I'm sure it is, because it's got the colour scheme. Regardless, still Dale very, very slowly making their way back into position. I mean, this is the situation where I'd be like, well, okay, Dale's kind of taking the piss now. They're moving very, very slowly. I'm just going to move in if I'm the attacker. Like, you've had ample opportunity to move your units back into position. It's not my fault if you've decided to dither. In fact, let's go up to times 6 speed. It's painful to watch Dale slowly creep across the battlefield. Surely we are about to get the beginning of this fight. I hope. Right, here we go. Bit of movement. That's what I like to see. Some archers threatening to get into position to start skirmishing down with the defending position. There's also the Isengard Ballista, which has moved forward. Now, the Isengard Ballista does need to be kind of careful, because if the Dragon's Breath comes forward, you can guarantee that will be one of the first ports of call. Forward comes the Isengard fodder as well, the Dunlending clansmen. Again, I really don't think that they need to wait for HRUN here. If that's what the attackers are doing, they really don't. Like, for God's sake, come on. Grab a hold of your balls and let's get this fight underway. We've got here Elder Council moving forward, so some javelins. Obviously it's a very tough looking defensive line that has been set up right from the off here. Low end spears screening the archers as they move forward, with higher end spears actually not too far away. So I mean, I really don't know if the defending cavalry is going to be able to do much of anything here, because they are already bottled up. And in this sort of situation, I kind of feel as though the cavalry should maybe be kept at the back and left until the late game when both sides are looking tired, because then a unit of Carmel's Dragon Knights can probably be a match winner all on their own. Whereas if you use them too early in this situation where you've allowed yourself to get bottled up, it could be pretty nasty. Belagair archers and Naruna Aru Royal Guard, a very good combination of archers here. Good affordable archers with those bucklers, but also the genuine quality that the Naruna Aru Royal Guard offer cannot be ignored in this situation. Still a slight hill advantage to the defenders as you would expect, but not to the same extent as it is on the lower ground. And I feel as though Umbar are well positioned here. More quality focused faction here, very good at skirmishing with the enemy. I feel as though if they play their cards right, they could definitely make something happen over on this side, but they do need to be careful. If they charge in unthinkingly, they're doomed. Ents are also loitering over here, interestingly enough. So still, HRUN are now getting forwards. But I mean, still, not really anything is happening. No arrows have even been traded yet, which kind of surprises me. I mean, here are the Earls of Dale sort of repositioning themselves. Surely the ceasefire can't still be in effect. I mean, I can understand why the defenders don't want to shoot orc fodder, but they will have to shoot Morannon archers, otherwise they'll just be under arrow fire indefinitely. So I'm a little bit surprised, honestly. Here we go. Finally we have a little bit of action as the dismounted Earls of Dale charge in. Not the best. Well, actually, no. Pretty good charge. Very thin line of Orc fodder. Unfortunately, though, the Elves of Dale actually have gotten in the way a little bit of the Carmel's Dragon Knights, so kind of the wrong way around there. The Dragon Knights needed to be the ones to lead the way, really, and it's not a huge amount of damage, to be quite frank. The Carmel's Dragon Knights are going to continue to go forward, however, and try and get into the Moran on Archers. This would be a pretty ideal situation for the Dunlending Clansmen to move forward, because the Orc fodder can sort of trap them from behind, which they may be Orc fodder, but they're still Spearmen. And then the better anti-cavalry bonus of the Dunlending Clansmen could come in, but a little bit too slow. The Olag High as well. So yeah, I mean, the Olag High are coming in here. The Earls of Dale are going to charge in, but charging into trolls like this can work, and it would work if it were the Carmel's Dragon Knights, but not if it's the Earls of Dale, because they do not have the armor-piercing charge. They don't have the charge bonus necessary to fell trolls instantly. And that's going to be a real problem for the Earls of Dale, because obviously in melee, trolls are devastating to cavalry. It's kind of the... As cavalry, you can charge into trolls and do a lot of damage quickly, and that's great, but you need to be really careful. This is better. This is the better way around. The Carmel's Dragon Knights are going to charge in, and you can see immediately that one of the trolls does fall, and the Olag High are probably the strongest unit of trolls in the game, to be honest with you. The Dragon Knights do need to get out of there, though, otherwise they too are not immune to getting hit by the damage of the Olag High. In come the Elves of Dale once again, charging into Harajam Spearmen and Mountain Trolls. That's again not an ideal target, to be honest with you, for the Elves of Dale, and rightly they break. Like I said, like, the Elves of Dale in this sort of battle are not the most useful thing, really, because they don't have any cavalry that they can try and engage. The Dragon Knights, meanwhile, will be better in this situation because the Harajam Spearmen are low-end spears, so not the biggest danger to a unit of knights. And the Mountain Trolls will be skewered as well. Across come more Harajam Spearmen. I've actually got some Woodland Realm Patrol out here in front who have revealed themselves, who are immediately going to start firing their arrows, but they're also immediately going to find themselves attacked by the Trolls. They're going after the Hiri Peng, the Isengard Ballista, and succeeding. Very, very nasty. Yeah, these Woodland Realm Patrol, I'm not really sure what Beshi was thinking here, leaving these guys exposed on the front. And I'm not really sure what the defenders are thinking either here, because they need to engage these skirmishers of the attackers. They can't just let them be, and I think that the Lake Town Infantry are now doing so. What are they actually firing at, though? Snaga skirmishers over here on the side. Isengard doing the right thing, trying to get their javelins into a good position, forcing the Dalian spearmen forward, so this very neat defensive line is already being pushed and pulled over the battlefield a little bit by the attackers, with relatively minimal effort, to be honest with you. Now, though, we can see that over here, the tone for this battle has most certainly been set. The Belagire Archers and Nairan Iroh Guard are going to continue to skirmish, but again, they're missing a trick here. They're shooting into the infantry on the front, the shielded infantry on the front, which is not the right way to do things. They need to engage the Mirkwood Archers, because if they don't, the Mirkwood Archers are just going to tee off into the Belagire. And while it may not be the most expensive unit, while it may not be the most vulnerable unit, it's free kills for the Elves. Not only that, but we also have the E-Strong Crossbowmen. So up here, the attackers not playing it quite so intelligently as they are doing so on the lower ground. And the defenders should be able to take good advantage of that. Beshi, he was obviously engaged with the Nairan Iroh Guard, but now he's going to retreat back behind his defensive line and engage with the Belagire, I'm sure. Down here, meanwhile, the Moran Archers continuing to fire away. And so far, they haven't really been engaged by any defending archers either, which is the problem. Like, the defensive line is too far forward here, and it doesn't have the support of its ranged units. Over here, meanwhile, the Dragon Knights continuing to try and cover the front line. Here are the Snaga skirmishers, that cheap javelins. They're a little bit exposed, mind you, and the Carmel's Dragon Knights are in a good position to charge into them if they play their cards right. The Isengard Ballista, I think, is trying to shoot through the front line, which is the right thing to do. They're so densely packed that those ballista bolts from Orthanc should be able to do a hefty amount of damage indeed. Dragon Knights, they are going to charge through the trees. I mean, this is risky because, like I said, Dunlending Clansmen, good anti-cavalry bonus, especially for such a cheap unit, but they are still vulnerable off the charge, especially to one of the tankiest units of knights in the game. They do manage to fell one of the knights, but they did manage to screen for the Snaga skirmishers at least, so those javelins are still online. Over here, meanwhile, the Uruk-hai infantry, a gap has been found by the Runic Knights. Charging in there. Decent amount of damage will be done, I'm sure, to the Uruk-hai infantry, cracking that unit in half. But they need to be careful, obviously, they need to get out of there before the Olag High. Ooh, and the Olag High do catch them, so My doppelganger's going to need to be on point here, and he's going to need to continue to force path away because those Mordor trolls managed to pick off a few more runic knights. They're going to charge once again into this little area over here. But once again, they're going to hit primarily Dunlending clansmen more so than the Snaga, and they're going to need to cycle back out quickly. Otherwise, those spears are going to start to find their mark. They do manage to do so without casualties this time, so that's just 3 kills for them. But they need to continue to run away from the Olag High over here. Meanwhile, I have to say, like, I'm not a big fan of how the defenders have set the table here. Like, the javelins are too far forward. It's not a good construction of the defense over here. They don't have the ability to skirmish with the attackers, who at this point are picking and choosing their targets. Their defensive line is too far forwards, away from the support of their skirmishers up on the high ground. The Isengard ballista is effectively able to pick and choose where it shoots. If it gets into a position up here on this hill over here, it could shoot through the line and get a significant amount of kills, which the defenders might not be able to recover from. So not the best start from them, from the defensive point of view, I have to say. Cumberland's Dragon Knights also over here still. I think over here, I mean, the one unit of archers they have been using to skirmish so far, the defenders, has been the Lake Town Infantry. But they only have a limited amount of ammunition, but they're going to move forward. And the Lake Town Infantry should be sufficient to deal with the Dunlending clansmen at least, but a couple of volleys from the Snaga skirmishers will change all that. What's going on up here? Yeah, not a fan of this either, the Belagair archers. I think they're probably just on fire at will, and they're shooting over the cliff into the front line. So, I mean, his allies have been doing quite well, but I have to say the Umbar player has been a little bit less savvy with his plays so far. But then again, it's a name that I don't recognise, so I'd assume he's a newer player, which is good to see. And at the very least, he's not handling this in the wrong way. It's just the details that I'm criticising here, because he's definitely doing the right thing in trying to skirmish first and foremost with his efficient archers, and then when the time comes, when the defenders maybe don't have as much ammunition anymore, move forward with the elite infantry and try and smash this defence down. Easier said than done, of course. RHUN, Dale and Mirkwood interspersing all their different units over here. This could be a big problem for Umbar though, because their army is in this narrow pass, and the Dragon's Breath is coming over here. The Dragon's Breath is a little bit too strong, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not sure when the hotfix is coming. I feel as though that has kind of stalled out because of like a lot of developers going off to help with Silmarillion Total War. But the Dragon's Breath needs to be toned down because it is far too powerful at the moment. And in this situation, Umbar are in massive trouble because they can't really back up because they're still going to be vulnerable. They can't really come forward because they'll be vulnerable to the Dragon's Breath and to stuff like the crossbows and archers. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place here, Umbar. And the defenders need something to go for them because as it stands, this front engagement has gone in favour of the attackers so far. The fodder just sort of moving forwards, acting as a bit of a screen. And the attackers, I mean, the tone has already been set. The attackers can afford to use their lower tier skirmishers effectively to just continue to weaken the defences before then moving in. In come the Orc Javelins. Now the Orc Javelins are a target which is definitely worth going after from something, whether it's the Eastron crossbows, whether it's the Dalian bowmen. They need to do something to stop these Javelins just having their way with the Allied Coalition's front line here. Yeah, they are doing so now. This is good to see. They are now going after the Lake Town Infantry because they need to make sure that the Orc Javelins aren't just able to throw their entire payload into this front line, because that would be more issues for the defenders to have to deal with. Javelins into this section of the front line. Combination of Spears of Emendwyr and Eastron Clansmen and Lokgamp for him. It doesn't really matter what they kill here as long as the front line is depleted enough that the attackers can then just roll forwards and crush it. Oof. The unmistakable thud of the Dragon's Breath, ripping right through the centre of the Umbar army, although to be fair, it only really hit well, I say that, no it didn't. It hit a lot of Balaketh shield bearers as well. Corsair infantry and Balaketh shield bearers. Umbar in real trouble here. And I think RHUN know it. I mean, if I were RHUN, I would just keep firing away. Umbar like fish in a barrel here. Easy. Easy work. I think they are going to fire again. Yep, there they go. And this time, yeah, the bouncing of the projectile really does hurt, but this time maybe not quite so devastating into the Corsair Blackguards this time. Now an Iron Guard still trying to skirmish. Definitely it hasn't gone Umbar's way so far down here. Meanwhile, Woodland Realm Patrol firing away, Dalian Bowman firing. So now the defenders taking the threat a little bit more seriously, going after the Orc Javelins. Like I said, good move. The Orc Javelins are just kind of stood here now though. They need to use all of their ammunition quickly before they're all killed. Just throw as much as you can into this front line, make it as weak as possible, and then roll forward with all your might. Although the attacking armies are still a little bit too spread out for my liking. Like now, you've made some good gains. Now I think would be a good time to start thinking about gathering your forces and moving forward. Uruk-hai crossbows in a good position up here on the hill, shooting into the Dalian section of the front line, which is actually made up of some elites as well. Earls of Dale and Dalian spearmen, a good target for the Uruk-hai crossmen to go after. The Lake Town infantry are trying to come forward to engage, but the Lake Town infantry are going to kill themselves, I think, by overextending a little bit too much. I mean, the Lake Town infantry, normally they'd be able to beat the Dunlending clansmen without too many issues, but because of the numbers discrepancy at this point, the wild men of Dunland should be victorious here, and they're trying to push through to get to the crossbows, but that is a fool's gambit, and all they're going to do is hasten their demise at the hands of the Dunlanders here. Here we go. This is a little bit more like it. The Orc fodder moving forward. Finally we're going to get a genuine engagement, and it's not just fodder on the front line, which is a mistake that is made often. Fodder would just bounce right off this all on its own, but there are units of quality moving forward as well. The Minas Morgul Chosen will make sure that this attack is maintained for a longer period of time, albeit they're going to need something a little bit extra, because something like the Gamperim are in a very, very good position to hold back an attack like this for a long period of time. Baltroth Tribesmen using their javelins as well will be a good unit to use in this situation. Morale on infantry moving forward. Here comes the Blackguard. Now the Blackguard, is this the best position to use the Blackguard in? Barding Herd, Eastron Clansmen. I mean, maybe, because if it does manage to break through, there are no real reinforcements on hand. I mean, there's some Scion Rim, but they're going to be committed over here because the other unit of Blackguard are coming in. In come the Trolls, but there's still quite a lot of armor-piercing units on the front line, good damage units as well, so certainly a risk, I would say. Javelins still flying through the air. Elder Council, the Eastron Crossmen should definitely think about firing at this point. But yeah, this is certainly more like it now. Dunlending Clansmen charging forward, some Uruk-hai infantry as well. Definitely a very depleted section of the front line at this point, with all of the crossbow bolts that have been flying thus far. One of the Olag-hai actually manages to make it through the front line and starts using his mallet to try and kill some of these Elder Councils. Going to be successful in that endeavour as well, but there's a lot of archers up on this hill now. Seeing the danger that they're in, I think, the defenders, they're going to need to pour more arrows into this attack. But the attackers, now that they've committed forward this much, they need to continue to do so. The Mountain Trolls were also committed over here and have also managed to push through the front line to engage the Baltroth Tribesmen. This will stop them from firing. I also hear the unmistakable whistle of crossbow bolts, and it's good to see that the Eastron Crossmen are now being used, because you can see pretty depleted section of the front line this now. There are more reinforcements moving forward. I mean, Southron archers that are out of ammunition are not exactly brilliant, but it's better than nothing. It's just to sort of keep the attack going. That's the key for the attackers now. They need the momentum to be on their side. Umbar have also moved forward in tandem with their allies on the other side, which is good, because if they continue to stay in place, that cannon would have continued to grill them alive. And now we'll see. This joint front line, though, is going to be tough, even for a heavy infantry faction like Umbar to try and break through. Definitely not the easiest task at hand for them. There's also units like Hiriauth on this front line. Eastron crossbows. I mean, Hiriauth are going to be absolutely dominant against a unit like the Corsair infantry. Flagrim in here as well. Arrows and crossbow bolts being traded. Oh dear. Grilling some of their own Hiri Peng, but managing to nonetheless get some decent hits off there into the Umbar forces. Bardian marksmen firing away as well. Good hits. I mean, not as if the Hiriauth need any assistance against the Corsair infantry, but hastening their demise. And over here, the defenders looking very, very dominant indeed. Ooh. Isengard Ballista trying to shoot at some reinforcements as they make their way down the hill. This huge line battle now going on. More reinforcements have arrived for the defenders as well since we last saw. The Sword Masters of Askaroth using those Zweihanders. the Dalian Paladins as well. So big committals here. The defenders want to hold this line. I'm not sure whether that's a wise move, however, because this part of the front line is starting to collapse. Isengard leading the way here as the Uruk-hai infantry push their way through. Sauron's will shoring things up, and now what the attackers can do is push through here and then maybe work their way up the line without the addition of reinforcements. But the Dragon Knights are here, the Ents are also on hand, and perhaps with a few charges from the Runic Knights they can stem the tide here. They certainly need to, because whenever you see one side of a front line collapse you always fear the worst. To be fair though, the defenders are noticing this, and the Dalian Paladins are kind of pointing in this direction now, so perhaps not all is lost. And from the front, I have to say, the attacks are falling apart because their reinforcements are just not getting here quickly enough. Like, what are all these units doing way back here from Lord Black Hole? They're useless to anyone back there. They need to be getting ready to push forwards, because if the attackers lose momentum here, they're in big trouble. Sauron's will being committed forward. Some more Harajam are arriving now in the Mahud warriors. Now we'll see if they can earn their keep in melee, but still, this front line, the Barding Herd trying their best to hold on, but numbers might be against them here. Defeat seems certain. Drakun Ironhammer has added me to their friends list. Moran on infantry, moving forwards. Here are the Temple Guard. What are the Temple Guard shooting at, I wonder? They're going after the Wardens of Amon-Lank, which is a good target, to be honest with you. The Carmel's Shadow Bows are up here as well, though, so the full fury, really, of the defending skirmishers has tried to do its thing, but they've certainly not had it all their own way. They've certainly been counter-skirmished to an extent. They still have a full unit of Elders of the Elven King. The Runic Rangers may be on their last legs, but, I mean, this will at least absorb the AP arrows the attackers have. They're trying to skirmish back as well. The Temple Guard are also a good force in melee, of course. I thought it was going to crash for a second then because of Ranger Fire. Meanwhile, the Ents are in here, right in and amongst things, trying to disrupt the front line. The Uruk-hai pikemen are here, and maybe a little bit premature on committing them, because no pikes at all is one of the weaknesses to this defensive army. And they're already being shot up and now being engaged by Ents. Some Ihiri Peng that are out of ammunition. Here comes some Scion Rim trying to shore up the line. So they were trying to work up the line, but I think they're running out of momentum here, the attackers, which is a bad sign for them. The Sauron's will are pretty much all on their own here on this front line, and they don't stand a chance against a unit like the Dalian Paladins. The Snaga Skirmishers will do their best, but Isengard looking a little bit depleted at this point in time. Reinforcements sorely needed. Meanwhile, Rumbar getting along down here. The Hiri starting to work up the line. Eastron crossbows now out of ammunition, just charging in, making life a little bit more difficult for Umbar. More forces they're going to have to get through. And the problem is, Umbar have been bottled up in this situation. They're skirmishers at this point on their last legs. They just have to throw everything forward. And the defenders will be very pleased with how the engagement with Umbar has gone from beginning to end. Very nice indeed. So the defenders will be victorious over there, but I'm not sure whether they're going to be victorious over here or not. I mean, things are going quite well for them in places, like over here. They've managed to kill off this middle section as well, so the arrows have really played their part here. Very difficult to keep track of archers in a battle like this and how they're doing. But with the amount of archers that Dale and Mirkwood had at their disposal, two of the best archer factions in the game, it's perhaps unsurprising that the attackers are starting to run out of steam here. Poison arrows now from the Morroquendi bows could be really useful for breaking off some of the lower tier units that are on the front line here for the attackers. In come the Elder Council, now out of javelin ammunition, I would assume, and now just going to muck in melee. Going to try and skewer as many orcs and evil men as they can with those spears. More javelins from the Elder Council coming in. Here, though, the attackers have got one crumb of comfort. They're kind of winning here in the middle. A combination of Dunlanders and Uruk-hai managing to push through, as well as some Mahud warriors. A very limited amount of Earls trying to hold the line all on their own, but that's not going to last for too much longer, I would imagine. More reinforcements will be required. Ooh, the Dragon's Wrath Crossmen. They should have a clear shot here. This could be their time to shine. Pretty damn good in melee as well, something else that will have to be dealt with. Yeah, they are. They're going to be able to shoot in. The Isengard Ballista crew are in melee, so out of ammunition. Dragon's Breath Cannon. What is going on over here? Greenwood Rangers revealing themselves. Unsurprising that Mirkwood have brought them, of course. So devastating. Elven King's Palace Guard are over here. Bows of Emondwyr. So there's no chance that Umbar are going to be victorious over here. There's just too much. What the attackers can hope for, though, is that the defenders have overcommitted on Mirkwood's resources, especially over here. And maybe they can make something happen elsewhere. But, I mean, it's a lot of forces which are going to be able to move to another point as well. Oof. Well, there goes the Dalian general. At the same time that the Dragon's Breath fired right through the South RHUN pikemen. I mean, at this point, that artillery is almost certainly paid for itself, so anything else is just gravy. Elves of the Elven King using their Silver Thorns. Scion Rim on the front line taking damage. Hiri Peng trying to... Well, the Black Shots are here as well, so presumably out of ammunition now. The Black Shots pulling out those anime greatswords that they wield. Uruk-hai Berserkers on the front line, but they're so low on numbers at this point. Again, in this sort of situation where archers are going to be, I think, the overriding factor in the battle, that's always going to be bad news for a unit like the Uruk-hai Berserkers. Scion Rim moving forwards. The Ents. I mean, Harad still have units back here, but I don't know. I kind of feel as though Harad has almost left their allies out, hung their allies out to dry a little bit here, because their reinforcements just weren't on hand. But also, I kind of feel as though in this kind of situation, oof, narrowly missing those South RHUN pikemen. I kind of feel as though even if Harad did push forward earlier, they may have been in a little bit of trouble. But now we can see some South RHUN pikemen. Maybe now that the arrows are a little bit lower in number, a unit like the South RHUN pikemen can shine, the AP. But primarily just the fact that they're pikes is going to be a good thing here. Moranon archers charging in, there's still some Sauron's Will, so the attackers are actually winning on this engagement over here. And I feel as though one thing that the defenders could get wrong here is if they overextend themselves, and they might do here. The Lurtz hunting pack was a thing that they probably needed to go after. Oof. Still that Dragon's Breath moving in. The Serpent's Fangs shooting. Hiri Peng fighting alongside the Black Shots. I mean, there's Mahud Berserkers coming over here, but I don't really think Mahud Berserkers are the answer. They're not strong enough as a unit. Too low tier. Alongside something else, yes. But on their own, especially against an Elven unit like that, they're asking for trouble. Meanwhile, Umbar, there are several Umbar units that will fight to the bitter end, including the Harbingers of Castamere. But Umbar, at this point, have largely been completely destroyed, which is not really the most surprising fact, given how this battle has gone. And this, of course, gives the defenders a lot more reinforcements they can send over to the other side. Umbar trying to escape with some of their units, but I don't think they're going to be all that successful. There's still some Harbingers, of course, right in here, as I said, but yeah, not looking good for them. So if the attackers are going to be victorious, it will need to be from the front. What have we got over here? The Nazgul, who are going to be very difficult to deal with, of course. There's a unit of Bardian marksmen which have engaged them. There goes the Isengard General, which is not a good sign. It means the Lurtz hunting pack are probably all but defeated at this point. The Nazgul are in here. A unit of Bardian marksmen, I mean, numbers-wise the Nazgul may struggle here, but Bardian marksmen, decent makeshift line infantry, but you need something a little bit better, I think, to deal with Nazgul. Barding Herd skewering Castamere, and there he goes. Oof. Dragon's Breath narrowly missing once again. Sauron's Will fighting alongside the Temple Guard, but they're going up against Dalian Royal Guard and Elven King's Palace Guard. It is a really daunting fight, that. Two exceptional units in melee, especially the Palace Guard. And the attackers trying to push forward still, but they aren't going to be successful even here, I don't think. Now, on the front line, you can see the Elder Council are still here. Dismounted Serpent Guard. Now pushing forward. I mean, this is the last roll of the dice, I think. This is the last genuine wave the attackers have, and I'm not sure whether 3 upgraded units of Serpent Guard are going to be sufficient to turn this battle around. They're decent, but you need more than decent in this situation. Serpent's Fangs. I mean, Demons of the Desert, maybe. In terms of overall manpower, it's probably quite similar at this point in time, but the quality is certainly on the defender's side, which I think is going to be the deciding factor here. Serpent Guard, I mean, here are the South RHUN pikemen doing a good job here against the Bardian marksmen, and with the backup of the Serpent Guard they should continue to do that. In comes the reinforcements from the other front, however, victorious against Umbar, and now moving in over here. Flag Rim. because it's mainly Harad left though, maybe the flag room won't be as useful as they otherwise would be. I mean, the AP will still be useful against the Serpent Guard though, I suppose. One of the Avari coming into frame there. Still the poison arrows, but see here, more flag rim. The Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, who looks like they still have they pulled out their blades. I mean, to be honest, they're probably more useful as infantry at this point. In come the Beast Hunters. I mean, Harad have a lot. Harad do have a lot, and I mean, the Demons of the Desert, if they're used properly, maybe, but I mean, there's still that runic artillery left. It is interesting though that, I mean, there's still technically 7 Harbingers left. Spears of Amenduia moving. Barding Herd. More reinforcements will make their way around from over here. Keldwyn River Patrol, maybe not the most impressive unit, but Hiri Lung and Greenwood Rangers will be. Bows of Amenduia up here just being used as regular archers at this point. Good high ground advantage. I mean, they definitely should be going after the Demons of the Desert and not the Serpent's Fangs. As soon as they're out of ammunition, they can then be used as cavalry in the traditional sense as well. In come the Elven King's Palace Guard. Going to be tearing into the dismounted Serpent Guard as well. And there goes the Mordor General, skewered by one of the officers from that unit. Belagair archers running away. I'm not sure how some Umbar units managed to get over here. Elves of the Elven King, of course, over here, having utilised their ammunition. That's another elite unit that the defenders are going to have at their disposal here in the late game. And again, while the numbers may have been similar, and yeah, here we go, the Demons of the Desert, the last hope of the attackers really are now being focused down. They've been engaged in melee, and they're being shot, which is a sign of the death knell of the attackers' hopes and dreams in this particular battle, I think. Ones of Amon Lank, who got really, they were really seen to by the Temple Guard earlier on with those AP arrows, but they managed to live, and now they're pulling out those axes, engaging the Serpent's Fangs. That's just another ranged unit Harad needed to be shooting, that now isn't. Yeah, that is, that's a problem. The cannon, again, proving its OP nature. You know, maybe not. I mean, you know, artillery at this point is going to be devastating no matter what. But I mean, there can be no doubt that the Dragon's Breath is too strong. It's a little bit ridiculous, to be honest, what it's able to offer. Still some Snaga, still 4 alerts hunting pack, but you're going to need more than that if you hope to turn this battle around. But I think at this point, the only thing the attackers can really do is take down as many as they can with them. Elves of the Elven King moving over to engage the Snaga. Needless to say, instantly breaking in the face of some of the finest warriors that Merc would have to offer. The undisputed finest, however, are over here. The upgraded Elven King's Palace Guard. The fact that they have an armour upgrade puts them in contention to be, in my opinion, they are, just because they have that sort of anti-cavalry bonus as well. They're the most versatile of the really strong infantry units in the game. They may not be on quite the same level at killing infantry as something like the Noldorin Blade Masters of Linden, but it's close enough to the point where that doesn't really matter. The fact that they're devastating against cavalry and sustained melee as well just gives them that little something extra that even the Noldorin Blade Masters do not have. In come the Keldwyn River Patrol. Southron Warband coming back now. You can see here the Demons of the Desert have sort of been trying to get some javelins off, but Thranduil chasing them down, as well as the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. Clean-up duty for the defenders at this point. One of the players admits defeat. Still some Serpent's Fangs back here. Some Mahud Berserkers being chased down by the artillery crew. And again, I mean, this is pretty much the sum total of what everyone has, so it's a close battle in terms of numbers, but I feel as though the tone of the battle has been set for the past 5,000 to 6,000 frames, so it was clear that the defenders were going to have a huge quality advantage, and in the end, that has proven to be too great for the attackers to overcome. The defensive position in the end was so nicely set up. And I worried for the attacks early on. I felt like they weren't skirmishing with the attackers enough. But in the end, it didn't matter. Maybe the ballista could have been better used as well. I was kind of assuming the ballista would get into a position to shoot right through the defensive line and do massive damage, and that never really came to pass, which is a bit of a shame. The last vestiges of that force that was over on the other side, the Barding Herd, now arriving. Southron Pikemen doing their best. But their best is not going to be good enough here. Especially not now that the line is being wrapped up by the Elven King's Palace Guard. Still some Keldwyn River Patrol over here, having to engage with the South RHUN warband. Back over here. Demons of the Desert being polished off there by the Elders of the Elven King. Some Hiri Lung are also going to do the same here to the Serpent's Fangs, although the Serpent's Fangs are good enough to the point where the Hiri Lung are going to need some support to do it. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. Those nasty Shotels that have wielded two-handed, but now coming in we have the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen to offer a little bit of support, which is going to turn the fight around, and the Serpent's Fangs will be defeated. Dragon's Breath moving forward, the South RHUN warband routing, South RHUN pikemen routing, fighting to the death. And that means the last genuine fight that is going to be had will be the Serpent's Fangs putting up their final stand. I really do like the look of the Serpent's Fangs. I like the masks, I like the colour scheme, I like the weapon as well, honestly. But none of that is going to be able to save them here, unfortunately. Yeah, very close, within 6%, but the quality discrepancy was always going to be the big difference maker here. Still moving around, Keldrin River Patrol, Dalian Royal Guard still standing tall. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers were killed at some point or another. They were in melee with the Lurch Hunting Pack at one point after all. And there goes the Serpent's Fangs. I think they admitted defeat actually. And that means, funnily enough, I mean more because they admitted defeat than anything else to his allies. The Umbar are going to be the last player standing, but I mean this shouldn't take too much longer. I mean they are spears in melee, the Naru Royal Guard, so the Bows of Emendwyr are not likely to do tons of damage off a charge. It should be more than enough though to kill them off eventually. Hiri Outh rounding the bend. The Bows of Emendwyr are just going to stay in melee, which will mean that a few more of them lose their lives, but with some more Elven infantry on the approach. This battle was always decided. A good battle though, and I feel as though it was just the fact that the attackers didn't, when they came forward, they needed to come forward with overwhelming force quickly. But unfortunately their attack was just too stretched. Mordor and Isengard came in, but Harad was lagging too far behind. They needed, that would have put them at the mercy of the archers and the crossbows and the rangers especially a little bit more, but I feel as though if they were going to do that, they needed to crack through that defence as quickly as they possibly could. And in the end that isn't what happened. 3 Naru Royal Guardsmen, the upgraded Hiri Outh, however, will be able to deal with them, especially with some support from the Spears of Emendwyr. Easy enough, and Umbar was the player that I feel like was in the most unfortunate situation here. Like they were never in a position where they looked like they were going to do anything. And that was more because the defence was just nicely set up. The Dragon's Breath as well, with how overpowered it is, was able to just deal the damage and force him forwards perhaps before he was ready. But on the other side, it's intermittently, the attackers did look like they were going to make something happen, but they just didn't have that killer blow that would have been necessary to go on to win the fight ultimately. But still, a good close battle, and the defenders victorious. A good mix, I think, Dale, Mirkwood and RHUN, a good mix of strengths. And I think that was certainly proven here. Well played. Big thank you to Tommy Wiseau for sending me this battle replay, because it was a battle of good quality. Even though he was on the losing team, I feel as though he did pretty well for himself ultimately. Having a look through, we do have, I don't know if I can really pick an MVP for the defenders, because they all intermix their armies so completely that it was almost like one big army rather than 3 separate ones, which is good. I feel as though, yeah, Harad, needed to be a little bit more bold. He left too many of his troops in reserve, and in the end, that wasn't too useful. Isengard and Mordor, of course, were on the receiving end of a lot of that, and Umbar were bullied for the vast majority of the fight, unfortunately, for them. But having a look at what did the damage for Mordor, the Nazgul did well, as they often tend to do in longer fights like this. The Temple Guard, considering most of those 108 kills were on high quality skirmishes like Shadow Bows and Wardens of Amon Lank, that's a good number to have, because in melee they were engaged by high tier units quite quickly, so that wouldn't have been a lot of kills there. Orc Javelins, considering the fact they were focused down quite quickly, still did a good job. Sauron's Will, mixed fortunes for them. Mountain Trolls did okay. Olag High, less so. And then the Black Guard of Barad-dûr maybe were committed a little bit prematurely, unfortunately for them. Can't really seem to... there we go. Orc Fodder, obviously nothing for them. Moran on infantry as well. So perhaps what you'd expect from Mordor, maybe a little bit of a disappointing performance from something like the Olag High. But they did get some kills on cavalry and did help to zone them out earlier on, so it's not all doom and gloom from that perspective. And it didn't crash. The game didn't crash, so I feel as though that is a takeaway I can have. Like, if you're doing a cityscape map that makes liberal use of fences, I'm just not going to do it anymore. It's just not worth the aggro. Like, it's a complete nightmare. I understand why people use them, but it sucks for me. It absolutely sucks, and I don't want them anymore. I don't want those battles that include loads of fences until someone comes up with a more creative solution to the point where they're not needed anymore. It's just not something I can put up with. Battles like this, though, absolutely. So, there's no need to be concerned. Like, Reforged content will continue to flow thick and fast, I'm sure. But yeah, like I said, certainly not those kinds of maps like Palagria or anything that makes big use of fences. Like any of the new map pack maps, honestly, like loads of them make use of fences to an extent where I just can't use them. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Until it's changed in the hotfix, which again I feel as though progress on that is kind of stalled out a little bit. It's just something I'm going to have to deal with. It's just something, well, not that I'm going to have to deal with, it's just something that I'm going to have to discount. So yeah, regardless, it is something that can be taken away. But this was a good match, and as for what comes next, I'm not entirely sure. I do have a significant amount of maps that I can draw from. I'm not sure. Maybe I can do and go back to Thranduil's Halls, one of the old classics, and do one of them. We shall see. Regardless, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.